But we're thankful to the fire department for putting up with us this evening, and we have a dry spot to sit and chat about the budget. That being said, I'd like to move right along. I have the smaller packet in front of me, and that's the one I'm going to be addressing tonight. Just wanted to introduce the members of does anybody else need a copy before we get started? Introduce the members of the Board of Finance to you, starting with I'm Deb Olson. Georgia Gaggle, not a member of the board. Finance coordinator for the town.
Mark Galloway, secretary. Marge DeBolt. And Diane Scott.
The budget process starts, months ago, November, December time, from the departments are asked by the Board of Selectmen for input for the budget. The Board of Selectmen puts together a budget and brings it to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance starts looking at it in February. We have weekly meetings. We meet with several of the departments, trying to answer any questions that we have to come up with the best possible plan for the following year, the following fiscal year, in fairness to everyone. Tonight is a hearing, and it's just like what it sounds. We are here to hear you, to hear what you have to say about the plan for the budget for the fiscal year 12-13. I will be going over some of the highlights of the budget changes between last year, current year, and next year's proposals. Give you a feel for where we're ending up as far as mill rate goes. Board of Finance will continue after the hearing is over tonight with a Board of Finance meeting where we will wrap up the budget and prepare it to be sent to the Board of Selectmen so that they can have a meeting of the town so that the budget can be voted on. And your plan is to do that for the 23rd. All right, turning to page 1 in the budget, which is actually not the first page in, but the second page in. This is the overall summary of the budget. It compares the last few actual expended years by department. It has a year-to-date expended column in the middle that takes you through January 31st. Has the 12-13 requests by department, followed by the Selectmen's request, followed by the Board of Finance's requests, and then there's a percentage column, the change between the board requests and the adopted budget for the current year. Although it's good to look at percentages, I want to remind you that the percentages are based on what we have this year compared to what we're planning for next year. So sometimes even though the percentages look big, they're actually very small dollar amounts. That being said, if you look at the very bottom of the page, you'll see that the total general change over next year to this year is a little over 2% of an increase. Regional District 17 is 3.43% increase. That budget was approved for a grand total of slightly over 3% for the year, the entire budget, school budget plus town budget. On the following page, you'll see some projected revenues.
One question
after F1, please. Following page is projected revenues. General property taxes, that's because of the reevaluation, the grand list increases slightly. Educational cost sharing, that's part of the money that comes from the state of Connecticut. That's based on a formula, based on population that the state calculates for us. And these are the projected numbers from the state as to what our revenue will be for the following fiscal year. It's not much different than what it has been. The second half of the page are services for charges that the town issues, recording fees, licenses, dump permits, real estate conveyance taxes, those types of things. We have some interest income. And so at the end, you'll see that there is revenue from all sources, which balances with projected expenditures. On the next page are the department summaries. I want to start off by telling you that according to the contract that the town has with the union and the hourly employees, there is a wage increase of 1.5% for this year, and that follows through for all the employees of the town. That's traditional. There's also a 10% increase in fuel and electricity that's been added into these budgets. In the selectmen's budget, I'm going to highlight some changes that are $5,000 or more within the accounts. In the selectmen's budget, there is an increase of about $30,000, and that is due to, in part, due to a temporary financial person to help the financial coordinator in that office. It's a, like I said, a temporary position. In the in the elections, there's an increase for election wages for people that man the polls, about slightly over $5,000. In the town council budget, there's a reduction. This is based on selectmen's recommendations that less legal counsel will be needed in the next fiscal year. In the insurance lines, once again, I guess the good news is that our town employees rating has been exceptionally good, and based on that, the expense for health insurance has decreased significantly for next year. Initially, we felt that we would need more money in the retirement lines for the town employees. However, since the budget has gone on through the months, we've received recommendations from Securian, and based on their actuarial costs, they have determined that not as much money as we initially thought would be needed for those plans, and so there was a reduction in those lines as well. Department 125, the land use office. That that department is reduced because of the ED coordinator's position is no longer being filled. The position is currently vacant, and it's not expected to be. He's not expected to be replaced. And this, again, is based on selectmen's recommendations. In the fire protection department, there's increased costs and capital expenses in building and property. Some additional turnout gear is needed. It has to be replaced every so often, and we're replacing some of that. And there's chain link fence that's going up and having that around the fire house with us. So that's causing an increase in that department. dispatch services, 230, Department 230, Valley Shore. This includes the expenses. That's a contract that the town has with the 911 phone calls, etc. Department 300, general labor. That is the 1.5% increase in salaries. Waste disposal, 335, that's a transfer station. You're hiring an additional person to help man the new transfer station, to check on permits, to make sure that they have their dump sticker, transfer station sticker, to make sure that bulky waste is being handled properly, to make sure that the compactors are run properly. We need a third person, so that is adding to the cost. We also have some site maintenance that we are budgeting for based on our best projection. We work with the departments on this to add overhead lights, to add additional money for fuel that's going to be needed. There's going to be outside camera so that the transfer station can be monitored on a 24-hour basis, and those things will add to the budget. The Department 425 will have the ambulance services. You see a reduction in there. That money has been built into the contingency fund, which you will see later in another 30 seconds. Contingency on page 5. We usually budget $100,000 for contingency. That's money that's budgeted into the fiscal year in case things come up and we need to pay for things that we don't expect. So we usually put about $100,000 into that fund. This year we're asking for $180,000 in that fund. Part of that is because of the ambulance contract that we have, and part of it is for heating and fuel electricity costs, because we are unsure where these prices are going to go. When we initially started the budget process in February and March, it looked like it would be inevitable that at this point in the year, we expected a gallon of gasoline to be around $5. But as you know, in the last month or so, a gallon of gasoline has actually reduced in price. So it's kind of a shot in the dark. We're doing the best we can, and we put some additional money in the contingency line for fuel costs, projections that may increase. The other thing that we have in the contingency line is money for the contract to help the Ambulance Association with their contractual staffing contract. Road projects are pretty self-evident. That's to maintain the roads in town. Debt service is for Rescue Truck 513. That is money that we owe, and that will be paid off 2 years from now in the budget for 15-16. On the next page, page 6, is our capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan is developed by a group of people that are assigned to that task. They meet with the departments and ask them for things that they might need. They get wish lists and sit down and talk to them, and from there they develop a budget with the town that goes out about 5 years so that we can see what we're looking at in the future as far as giant projects go, big costs go. Again, you'll see an X if it's new to the plan, total cost for the project, any prior appropriations, any money that's already been budgeted in the prior years. And you'll see the Department and Board of Selectmen approved column, Board of Finance approved column, and then you'll see the costs projected out for the next 4 years. Continue on through the next couple pages. This continues on. And at the very end, on page 8, at the bottom of the column where it says BOF approved, that's been the dark bolded line, you'll see a use of unallocated CNR monies for $125,000. That's money that's in a special fund. It's not part of the general fund that you are voting, or that we are talking about tonight. It's a separate fund. It's money that has been unused for other capital projects, and it is available for current capital projects if you choose to use it in that manner. The last time the Board of Finance met, we started to discuss this, but we did not have time to finish our discussion. We will finish our discussion about this later on tonight. The reason I put it in the budget document is because I wanted you to know that we're trying our best to look into the monies that are available to help decrease the mill rate, decrease some of these expenses that the town is incurring. Next page, page 9, is the capital appropriations page. This is something that we discovered this year when we were going through the charter, when we were looking at the capital plan. We discovered that although our town likes to look at things in 5-year periods, which is, it's good to look at things in 5-year periods, there's nothing wrong with that, but our charter talks about 3 years. So according to charter, after 3 years, if the project's not completed, we need to vote on that to put that back into the capital plan so that these projects can continue. So until we revise our charter to match our capital plan document, we need to have a vote by the townspeople to allow us to continue these projects, to allow us to use this money that's already been set aside and taxed and in a special fund, but the time period has run out. So these are a list of those projects. So this is the list of projects, the year in which they were developed, and the amount of money for them, and the balance is $265,874. And when the selectmen have the budget meeting on the 23rd, this is something additionally that needs to be voted on. Last page is a nice little pie chart. That will show you how the budget is divvied up. The bottom pie chart shows you the current fiscal year. The top pie chart shows you the projected fiscal year of 12-13. You can see that 73% of our pie is in school. That's okay, education is important. About 8% is general government. Public safety is about 3%. Public works is 8%. Health and social services is 1%. Miscellaneous organizations and recreation 2%. Contingency is about 1%. Capital budget is about 2%, and so is road projects. In all honesty, that's not much different than what we usually do. Pretty much par for the course. If you flip back to the page, the beginning of your document, page 1 and page 2 of your document where it talks about the overall summary of expenditures by department, including the school, and then total revenue. You'll see that these dollar amounts balance out. The revenue sources balance out with the total projected expenditures. As you know, taxes are what is dependent upon balancing the budget. In order to calculate the mill rate, what we do is we take the required amount of taxes, we divide it by the grand list, which is the number of all of the value of the properties in town, and we divide it by 1,000. Doing that, we get approximately $897,449. Currently, our mill rate is 28.23 mils. Currently, the Board of Finance is projecting a 0.73 mil increase, which is about $73 per $100,000 of your property valuation. So the mill rate in this scenario would go up to about 28.96, slightly higher than it is today. Next, the projection. We won't know the final numbers until we finish our meeting tonight and then bring the final budget to the Board of Selectmen for your approval on the 23rd when we actually have the vote. So once again, tonight is for hearing you, what you have to say to us to help us finish up the approval of this budget. Anyone else would like to say before we open our questions? Okay, so now let the questions begin. Does anybody have any questions about the budget? Or comments? Right, we like comments too. You don't have to have questions, just make a comment. Ed?
I'll bring the guys. First page, why do we have a year-to-date stuck in January and what we have up to May? Or at least projected to the end of the year?
Ed, could you please speak up?
Sure.
Thank you.
Peter's question. I'm asking why doesn't the year-to-date expended on the first page stops in May, so you have the figures as they are right now?
Good question. Georgia needs help in her office. We're putting a financial person in there to help her out. We do have numbers. Board of Finance gets financial reports on a monthly basis. This was the best that the office could do at the time. An idea as to where it stands, you can project it out. Yes, we could come up with more information if you wanted to, but that's the best that we can do at this time.
Joanne Wackerman. This temporary position, is it going to run from just the budget time, 12 months at part-time, 6 months at part-time, and how can we be sure it won't turn into another position full-time?
It is a temp position through a temp agency. It's not, we're not hiring. It's a trial position to see how it goes in the office. So one of the things that we've been talking about is that Georgia does need additional help. And this is one way that the selectmen feel it's necessary to get to that help. Thank you. Okay, yes, Scott.
Scott Solomon, for Haddam. You mentioned that the contingency went from 100,000 to 180, and that contingency was some of that money was going to be for Haddam. Can you state what that amount of that 80,000 is going to be?
67,500, I believe is the amount.
The reason I asked that is that there was a different value that was noted in the printing in the last bulletin article.
I can't count what's printed in the bulletin
That's
article.
why I was asking for clarification.
Hi.
Hi, Steve Rocco. When do you want input on items in the capital plan?
Now would be fine.
Now is good?
Yes.
Representing the jail committee.
Good, we have questions about the jail.
Okay. And I'd like to read a letter that Joanna Nessie sent in.
Yeah, pretty good.
And then I'll make a couple of comments and answer questions. Members of the board, we're ready to express.
Speak up, please.
To members of the Board of Finance, we are writing to express our disappointment at your decision to deny our budget request for the 2012 and 2013 capital plan. We believe your decision is short-sighted and puts this historic town asset at further risk for deterioration. As was pointed out during our capital plan presentation, this board has been very supportive of this board of the jail project to date, and we're grateful to you for working with us over the past few years to make the building safe. The roof project, now completed, will be very soon followed by the removal of hazardous materials and the demolition of the brick structure at the rear of the building, the one-story addition. That's not part of the historic building. The funding we requested from you in the coming fiscal year was designated for what we believe to be the next important step in securing the building. That is, the interior demolition work to clean up the large amounts of debris that make the building unsafe to enter. In addition, however, this cleanup is also essential to drying out the building. One byproduct of having made the building weather-tight is what have been inadvertent ventilation created by the gaping holes, deteriorated windows that have now been sealed. Mold and mildew could continue to build up, causing the building to degrade from the inside out rather than from the outside in. As you are aware, the Board of Selectmen has given some consideration to asking for a change in the wording of the deed that accompanied the state of Connecticut's turning over ownership of the jail to the town. But at this moment, no such change has been approved, and the town continues to own and be responsible for the building. Any future change in ownership, we believe, should play no part in your decision to fund the jail in the coming fiscal year or not. To that end, we would ask that you reconsider our capital plan request for both the interior demolition work and the temporary electrical service as part of your continuing commitment to this project. Thank you from the jail committee. I think there's a couple of really good reasons. The demolition part was $20,000. There's a couple of good reasons to put that money back in. Just like anybody who's a homeowner or who would own any kind of building, a stitch in time saves time type of thing. If we can get the building dried out and get all the waterlogged materials out of there, get the building safe at the same time, we will prevent further degradation going forward. If we leave all of the wet material in there and the mold continues to grow, it's just going to be a more expensive problem later. And we've come so far, we're so close to being able to say, we can leave the building for however much time we need. It'll be totally weather-tight, we can mothball until whatever good idea comes along or a proposal from somebody, but we're not quite there. So if we could just get that other $20,000, there's also the temporary electric that we asked for, but frankly, the demolition part is more important. So we're requesting that we do that. Not only would it protect the building, but I know there was a discussion about possibly seeking someone to buy the property or submit proposals for reuse of it. And did anything happen with the deed language, Paul?
No, nothing.
Not yet, so that's not happening this year. But in any case, what this would do, by really clearing it out, making it dry, making it safe, possible buyers, prospective buyers or developers could then come in and see the building. It would present much better than it does now, with things dripping and things hanging, and it just is awful. So that's basically the pitch. We just want to go that last step, and then we can have the building clean, dry, and safe. We can hold meetings at that point with the public and discuss what the possibilities are. There are grant monies available from the state and from national sources that at that point we'll have time to investigate, and we can take our time. But we just want to get it finished for this step.
Does that clear it up for everybody as to what?
Just to quick, I think our concern on this was more making it more, the money was going to be spent to make it more presentable, and I think our feeling was it sort of is what it is. It's not really going to be presentable if you would regardless, and someone who looks at it is going to have a lot of vision anyway. What I'm starting to do now, and I want to make sure we're clear on that, is that most of this money really will be spent to help preserve the building and prevent further damage.
Exactly.
We kind of understood that part was done, but that's not.
It's the last piece of that, which is removal of the interior partitions, whatever flooring materials that could be wet. Ceilings are falling down because they're wet. There's paint hanging and insulation hanging. So it's basically clearing it out and just making it safe and clean and dry inside. And then, as I say, we can keep it sealed up. Now we've got the new windows in. They're not new. They're restored from the Byglass company, which was a great way to go because we saved the historic windows, which are very large. And what he did was he took them out and put in a second pane of glass, made them airtight, weather stripped them, filled and painted them. So they look really good. They don't look brand new, but they look very good. So the roof is on. The windows are almost all in, and this should be it for now.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you. Hi.
I'd like to follow up on that. I'm Jan Street, I'm part of the jail committee. And one of the things that we would like to do is let people in town take a look at this building, which you can't do now. It's a dangerous place to be. I was in there recently and fell and I got 8 stitches. So it's an unsafe place to be. There's moss growing on the walls. There's ferns growing on the floor. And that's the wet that we're concerned about that we need to get out. Once that's cleaned up, then people in town can take a look at the building and decide, well, do we want to keep it for something, or are we going to want to look for somebody who might want to take it over because they want a historic building as a business? But so we're almost there. We just need to stop at a smart place, and where we're stopping now is a smart decision. So I'm glad that we had a chance to clarify what we were.
Yes, I'm glad you came tonight. Thank you. Any other comments? Since you already talked, I'll take this guy.
If there's someone ahead of me.
No, go ahead.
First, I'd like to compliment you as a group in being, doing what you do is no picnic. And I can see from reading all of your minutes, it's a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. I'm Adam here now.
Oh, it's nice to put a face to the name.
As a resident and as a taxpayer, I have an interest in the budget. As a reporter for the Haddam Bulletin, I have an obligation to try to disseminate information to the other 8,000 people who aren't here in Haddam. So, having been in my professional career, corporate career, I did budget, so I understand the budget process. One thing I don't understand, and I've been really wrestling with this for a few weeks, is I try to personally, when I write, to try to tell as much as I can about whatever I'm writing, maybe too much. I would think that it's part of your responsibility as the chief financial officer of the town to tell the public everything, open book. For this year, for the first time, I noticed an accounting device which somehow obscures the cost of running the town government. And that's what, and I don't even want to get into the history or how it came about, the debt service fund. it in effect makes public, they see in the budget, there's $98,000 that's going to be spent for the transfer station that isn't reflected in the cost of running the tank. Good or bad, doesn't matter. The question is, why are we using the debt service fund? What purpose does it serve? How does it help the taxpayers in any way? That you couldn't do by just saying, ban interest, $98,000, and then, after the annual budget meeting, say we're going to take money out of the general fund to cover that cost.
Well, we wouldn't want to tax people for things that, to unnecessarily tax them. We have money in debt service that's been placed there over the years from various projects and various decisions that the board's made to put this money in the debt service fund. Debt service fund is there in this instance because the Board of Finance, by working through the Board of Selectmen, knows that there are several large projects coming along. And so we have money in debt service. It's tax money it's money that people have already paid through their tax dollars. And it became available, for instance, when the Johnson property got sold. So it's in debt service fund, because now when new debt comes along, we can help offset the cost of that. So the transfer stations are available.
But I don't understand is that the fund never existed until 2010, and it wasn't funded until this year. And I don't know exactly, money from the general fund funded that fund. It's from the auditor's reports. Until just recently, the fund had due from other funds $605,000. So the question becomes, next year you're going to have a $250,000 debt service next fiscal year 14. 2014, you're going to fund the $2,900,000 to run the transfers, to pay for the transfers. It's going to have a debt service cost of in excess of $200,000. Your fund is going to run out in 2 years. What are you going to keep taking money out of the general fund to fund that?
This is something that we need to continue talking about. It's something that started, as I said earlier in this meeting. We started to talk about this a couple of meetings ago, but we did not have time to finish our discussion. So our discussion needs to be finished, but we haven't had the opportunity yet. But we are going to talk about this later on tonight. And we look at the debt service and the money that's in the debt service fund to see how we can best be transitioned into the cost of, for example, the transfer station debt to help smooth out the effect that that has on the mill rate in the general fund for taxpayers.
It sounds to me that it's a surplus fund. Because the general fund was on the Board of Finance. The money from the property, from the Johnson's property came back. I remember making the motion to put it in the open space fund, and it was not seconded. So that money was in the general fund at that time. That's when it went in. So at what point did it get transferred into this new debt service fund? I mean, there's no town meetings, no anything. You're taking money from the general fund right now and passing it through
Well, it
the
was a
debt
motion that
service.
was made at the Board of Finance meeting. I can't remember what time meeting it was. 6/9/2010. It was 3/9/2010. There was a motion that was made at the Board of Finance to move the money to debt service because we knew that there was large projects coming along.
Did it go to the town meeting?
Yes, it did. You were there.
Do you want to take this gentleman first?
Sure. Yeah, no,
That's fine.
Scott Stockton and Haddam Ambulance, I have something I'd like to read to everybody present. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes, I'd like to make you, the taxpayers of Haddam, aware of a potentially serious situation regarding emergency ambulance service in our town. For 36 years, the Haddam Volunteer Ambulance Service has provided quality emergency medical services when called upon to do so. During these years, HVAS has been fiscally conservative and has established a capital reserve fund, which is paid for all of our medical supplies, equipment, uniforms, building, and replacement ambulances, which now cost close to $200,000 each, all without asking the taxpayers for any support. Throughout the years, the relatively small base group of volunteer members of the ambulance grew, but now it's beginning to shrink. As the population in town ages, increasing the call volume each year, our senior members are beginning to retire. Training a new volunteer takes about a year before they are ready to staff the ambulance unsupervised. And this is a situation that we have been actively working on, but there are just not a large number of volunteers stepping forward to serve. We identified this problem several years ago and recommended that the town enter into a contract with a firm that provides supplemental EMS staffing similar to a nurse staffing agency. This was done and a contract was established and remains in place with the town for these services. Line item number 425 in the budget reads Haddam Ambulance Services. But in reality, this money does not come to HVAS, but is paid directly to that staffing company which provides EMTs to staff the Haddam ambulance during periods when volunteers are not available. It is important for all taxpayers to clearly understand that Haddam Ambulance has never received 1 cent of its budgeted money. Last year, Haddam Ambulance requested $145,000 to be earmarked for this contract. The Board of Finance dropped the number to $135,000, of which the town paid $90,000 and Haddam Ambulance paid $45,000. Haddam Ambulance also anticipates that an additional amount of approximately $40,000 will be paid from Haddam Ambulance reserves for the remainder of this fiscal year, making the system almost a 50-50 split at an annualized cost of approximately $175,000. This year, Haddam Ambulance requested $160,000, $120,000 from the town, and $40,000 from Haddam Ambulance with the agreement that Haddam Ambulance would again pay anything over the requested amount. The Board of Finance's reaction to our request was to cut that request by $97,500, put $67,500 in the contingency fund, not recognize the need for the $30,000 increase, and push off all discussions until sometime this summer, after the taxpayers have already voted on this budget. Haddam Ambulance is concerned on several fronts. The $22,500 that's been budgeted is barely enough for the first quarter of the fiscal year. There have been no definitive dates scheduled for the upcoming discussions. Each member of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance have been provided with an EMS consultant's report explaining this issue in great detail, and that if these contingency funds are used elsewhere, the emergency medical system will be shortchanged and placed in danger. It appears that the goal of the Board of Finance may be to force Haddam Ambulance to spend down its capital reserves to nothing before the Board of Finance takes on the issue of adequate funding for these services in our town, and recognition that there is a staffing problem which is rapidly becoming a regional problem. If this is the Board of Finance's goal, and Haddam Ambulance is forced into spending its reserves, then we are here now to sound the alarm bell. Without these reserves, all of the reserves, the entire cost of the ambulance capital expense will, for the first time in history, and in less than 2 budget cycles, rest squarely on the taxpayers, and the subsidy needed for ambulance services at that point will be 2 to 3 times higher than Haddam Ambulance's request before the Board of Finance and those present this evening. Haddam Ambulance has tried for the last several years to be proactive in addressing the staffing problem while being fiscally conservative and keeping additional operation burdens off the taxpayers. If the staffing contract is not funded properly through the town's support, Haddam Ambulance will be forced to look at measures that may, in the long run, mean extended response times, and that will have a much more far-reaching impact on the residents than restoring level funding from last year and a $30,000 increase, which is $3.77 per person over last year. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter, and we ask you, the Board of Finance, to support our request and move the entire $90,000 into the regular budget and leave the $30,000 in the contingency fund, subject to some discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aren't you going to answer those concerns? Are you going to do that?
We're here to hear what you have to say and what your concerns are, and we're going to follow through the discussion at our meeting, which will follow this hearing.
You answered other people when they asked questions.
I didn't think you asked a question.
Can't make comments to that. I thought that's what this meeting was for.
Scott, sure. I think the biggest issue number one, I don't think anyone on I'm not speaking for the Board of Finance, but we hung around long enough together that I think I have a sense of where everyone's coming from. And I don't think anyone on the Board of Finance is going to vote for funding such that the people of Haddam won't be served by the ambulance service. It's a bit complicated, but I think the bottom line is we support the ambulance service. I don't think there's any question about that. I think your biggest concern is that you folks are going to run out of money. I don't think we're not going to let that happen. I think you made a statement about your concern about it being $30,000 or $60,000 a year short, and you were concerned that you might run out of your cash reserves. What are your cash reserves right now?
Approximately $450,000.
Okay, so we're not going to let you run out of that money. And I know you need that to buy an ambulance at a certain point in time and so on. But with $450,000 in the bank, with the extra contingency money that we built into this budget, we are not going to let the people of the town of Haddam go without ambulance service. We're not going to let the ambulance service be high and dry. But we do want to spend more time to review that whole situation, be sure that we're working with you in the best way that we can to provide the best service to the people at the best cost.
And we look forward to working with you. Please realize that without additional money as we're going through, and we want to have a working relationship with the town, because by working together, we can keep the cost of the taxpayer at a reduced amount. Certainly, we're spending now approximately $7,500 every 2 weeks. The budget has been expended for this fiscal year, approximately $15,000 a month. So $40,000 until the end of the year may be a modest amount. Again, we're very concerned about that. We want to continue to work with the town, and again, when we're asked for a budget request, we're sent a request and we submit a request. And then, we're provided back with an amount of $22,005, and then we'll talk further if it's concerning to us.
I guess I would also like to state that I'm just going to echo what Harlan says, that nobody is interested in impeding the ambulance service that's provided to the residents of Haddam. But I do think that the residents should know that while we pay the contract for that, for the extra to the ambulance service that functions when volunteers are not available to do so, that revenues are received from persons, insurance companies who pay the ambulance, and that money it's a big discussion we have to have about how that money is handled, because that money we have not resolved how that money comes to you or comes to us. That discussion has not happened. So our concern this year was that when we get to budget season, we're spending 30 minutes with people, and that is not sufficient to discuss the issue of funding the ambulance service adequately for your purposes and for ours. And it's just because it's budget season. So our goal was to ensure that we're going to have that discussion in the summer, which I'm dedicated. We are all dedicated to having that discussion.
Yeah. And again, for the know, when that concern was raised, we met with First Selectman Stefano and worked out an arrangement whereby providing a contribution back to the town based on services rendered for ERI employees.
That's right. That's correct.
That's where that $45,000 came from. And our EMS consultant that prepared a report, which all of you and the Board of Selectmen received, completely showed forecasted futures of reimbursement rates, which are decreasing as call volumes go up. The cost of readiness is the issue. And I can't, and one question was that by looking at your call volume, can you plan when to staff crews? You can't do that when there's someone that's going to dial 911. When someone dials 911, there has to be an ambulance ready to respond. So to say, well, we don't go on a call 4 Thursdays out of the month or 3 Thursdays out of the month, we won't staff anybody, we can't do that. It's the cost of readiness that we have to do. We're on the same page, we look forward to discussing that with you. Our concern is real, we'd like to meet with you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
And we're taking it seriously. In fact, we're taking it so seriously that we're willing to meet over the summer, have extra meetings on top of our regular meetings so that we can get together with you and work this out.
As soon as you could articulate some dates, that would be wonderful, because we're talking about summertime and vacations. That can grow
Absolutely.
very difficult.
We're all in the same boat.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Mike Fortuna,
Oh, okay, of course, sorry.
I really am just here to report that at our last Economic Development Commission meeting, it was voted unanimously to request the Board of Finance refund the Economic Development Coordinator position. We recognize that ship has sort of sailed this year, but maybe we can throw this into your summer discussions too, to start planning some economic development to try and generate more revenues than can be generated on the residential tax base. I just want to report that the Economic Development Commission thinks that's an important position. We made our case last year and it was funded. And even though Tom Gavious has taken a position elsewhere, we think it's an important position and will pay dividends down the road to help balance the budget.
I have to agree with Mr. Aronoff and Mr. Schwing. Debt services is not a fund. Debt service is an obligation that the town has that they owe on something. Or it could be debt services that a corporation owes. When that money came in from the sale of Johnson, I wondered where it ever went because I never saw anything on it. It should have gone in the general fund as revenue. You could have had a special meeting to say, let's put it aside, let's do something, let's defer some taxes 1 year, whatever. But debt services used to be listed, which brings me to my other point. The board never, and I didn't go online, so if I'm speaking out of turn, I apologize, I didn't have time. We used to run all of those funds so the taxpayer could see what our debts were. At one time, we were paying for the Johnson property, we were paying for, I think, a vacuum truck, and maybe a fire truck, I don't remember. But you showed that, debt services, whatever it was, 100,000, 30 for this, 30 for that, 30 for whatever. You showed that so your taxpayer would know where their money was going. Not a line item as an expense. You don't show what's in the capital non-recurring. Maybe people here would say to you, I don't want you to take out 125, you should only take out 100. Maybe they'd say to you, take out 150. We don't know what's in that. Your medical self-insurance, that's not shown. I have asked at other meetings, and I'm going to ask again. Please show all those separate funds. It's not part of the budget, but it is part of your taxpayers' dollars, and they have a right to know it. And I will dig through my old records if I have to dig them out for you again. But we should be showing them. That's only fair. I think if you go out of your way to give you detail, you're asking people for their questions, that's part of it. Give them all the information. I know it can be overwhelming sometimes. If they don't understand it, they'll ask questions on it. But they really should see it.
Unless I'm missing something, I'll ask the rest of the board, and Joe in particular, to help me. But we have, well, I'm looking at the slightly thicker packet, so maybe my page is off, I'm sorry. Page 1, the $49,000 for Rescue 515 is debt service. So it's there, it's listed. The other items that are now fallen off the chart, which include Johnson and the vacuum truck, exactly as you mentioned, are only listed for the old years, but they're still listed because they fall into this history. So I think there are a ton of things in the audit report that aren't here in the budget, and that's available for anybody who wants to dig through that. Joanne, you certainly have been there and know that. It's a mountain of paper, and on one hand, you can say it adds to the clarity, on the other hand, you can easily say it adds to the confusion. I don't know where you draw the line. This is where we drew the line, but all the debt service is here.
One of the things you may be thinking of doing, a lot of the items in the capital plan have an account. And when we look at the thing that has many, many, many lines in the report we get every month, that's the money that's been set aside each year for those capital items. There's almost nothing that we're taking down right now.
There's almost nothing left.
We don't have
We have almost no debt. There's hardly any other long-term debt we have right now. But I think I know the report you're talking about, that we see every month, the thing that has many lines in it. And it's all of these, so it shows how much money's been set aside. So basically, you have that information. We're really not trying to hide anything.
If that were the
But how
case,
about
then
the
the
money?
budget doesn't add up. Because if you look on your first page, there's only $48,000 for the selectmen's request. You're talking about the $98,000. What the public looks at is the first page. The selectmen didn't ask for any advance interest. I have the selectmen's request for March 7th. There was no band money in it. I appreciate that the fact you put it in, that's how I knew about it. But if you add up all of your columns, you can't come up with the total that you show for debt service on page one. What's the page? It's the first or something page with one. But the excellent point, I think the issue was, I was confused. I actually read the minutes and everything. I saw when you approved it, late March 28th. But it just seems you should tell the public everything. I shouldn't have to tell the public.
But again, if you make this out to try to hide something, you know the last time the town bonded something? You know? I don't know. I've been on the board for 10 years.
Pay off negative ink.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time.
And that was the first time ever the town had.
Most of the money that's ever bonded is the school system that bonds money. We almost never buy anything we have to bond. So it's not a normal ongoing line that we used to have. It's a pretty new thing for this.
What I'm trying to say is,
On page 34, you show selectmen's request 3563 for a total of 147.
What page was that again, Ed?
Page 34, I'm sorry, page 34.
excuse me, did you say page 3 and 4 or
34. 34. You don't have it. Oh, this is the question. Well, from that page, there's 35,000 and 63,000 that the selectmen is requesting for a total of 147,921 for a debt service. What Alan's saying with the first page, it's not there anymore, but we're going to pay that this year. So how do we know?
I think your point is well taken. This is the whole issue of debt service and the transition, where this isn't part of debt service per se, it's these interim loans. It's a new experience to all of us. Nobody's trying to hide anything, but could there have been a better way to have reported it? Maybe so. Next go round, we'll get a little better. Part of the public hearing process is for you to ask questions and get clarification on these things. You've done a good job. I hope you clarify.
Okay, so the next question is that, are we going to transfer that money at the town budget meeting? We're going to see the transfer from the debt fund, to this line. How's that going to do that?
Ed, excuse me.
We can't do it.
hear that here.
My question was, there's going to be a transfer to pay for the debt service. Like you said, there's not a line up front. We know how much we're going to pay this year. We're obviously going to pay more than the 49,921, right? But we can't see that on our sheet. And it's probably a problem because it's new, something we get into. I understand that part. But the part is that how are you going to do that technically coming in the town budget? How are you going to vote for that if it's not shown here? That was my question.
out of the debt service fund, which is not part of the budget. Part of the attempt to add transparency was to put it in, select a request, so we knew it was going to be paid. It's not being funded with tax dollars, but it's being paid with monies that are already available. So it's going to be paid out of the debt service fund.
By statute, you need a town meeting to approve. You could just pay anything with that fund. The Board of Finance can do it.
The debt service fund, the name says what it's for debt service. So by establishing the fund last year, that allowed us to pay debt service out of that fund. And that's what we're doing.
I didn't mean to make this meeting a discussion of, this is nitpicking a little bit. A more fundamental issue is transparency, so the public knows what they're spending, however they're spending the money. I noticed with great interest there's a Board of Finance policy statement on debt service in the future. Can that be made public so the public knows what your policy is? In the future, in your minutes, you approved a policy for debt service.
Oh, yes, you're talking about the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance has been working on creating some policies for itself, and I think that's what you're referring to.
Well, the reason that I even bring it up is Haddam, you know I like to make comparisons with other towns. Haddam has had one of the lowest debt service per household per capita of any town in the state. The reason why? We haven't borrowed any money here. That's some people consider that good down Yankee, frugality. In the future, we're going to be borrowing money, perhaps even more money if we have water remediation issues and pollution remediation. It would seem the reason that I was a little bit surprised about the debt service fund is it's a device in a way. They're going to run out of money very quickly. You only have 605,000, you're spending 98 right now. So we'll be down to 500,000. If at some point it will run out of money and it will be a useless vehicle, or you'll keep funding it. Each time you fund it, it still doesn't show up on the budget as an expense, just as it doesn't right now, because the debt service is $48,000 this year for the trucks. So the point that I'm curious about going forward, if there is a policy, if you say the first $50,000 of debt service of every year will come out of the fund, and then the rest will be paid out of the selectmen's budget, that would make sense. But right now it's very ambiguous what
And I think part of the problem is that this is the first time we've dealt with it, and we are trying to be as transparent as possible. We're definitely not trying to hide anything. And part of that transparency is that people are asking a lot of questions, and we're doing the best we can, putting this on paper in a way so that the majority of people can understand it, and questions are going to be asked, and hopefully, we're sufficiently answering them, but definitely not trying to hide anything. We're trying to use taxpayer dollars as wisely as possible. We are all taxpayers ourselves, and I don't know what else to say. We're trying to do the best we can, as far as that goes. But we'll take into consideration, we'll definitely take what you say into consideration, because you raised some good points. Scott?
Deborah, this is not a finance question per se, but is there a way that department heads to be notified when your meetings are going to occur for a change of location or a change of date? Is there a way that department heads can be contacted?
We post everything on the town's website. We don't have access to the town website, so we have to request it through the town office building that when we have to make changes, like tonight's meeting was a change. We do that as quickly as possible so that the town is sufficiently noticed.
I'd like to know who all the department heads are, Scott, and that's going to post them for 10 years, and I can't do it. So I share your pain.
Yeah, if there was some way whether we can tie it in with first selectmen as well as for finance, to somehow get the information out so that we can make sure that everyone is fully informed as to when things are occurring. I think that would be a great benefit to everyone.
Are you?
We do post our calendar. The Board of Finance does post its meeting schedule way in advance. And like I said, it's the last week. It's when changes occurs when we run into some difficulties.
That would be the concern.
And we're trying to address that.
Right.
It's an ongoing issue.
Where are you looking on the website to find the information, Scott?
Well,
Do you go on all of our website?
on occasion I do, but again, looking at the information that's publicly available, whether it be with the publications such as the bulletin, which will list the dates and the times when the meetings will be.
Yeah, usually any meetings for the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen is listed under the boards. All this information that...
On the town website.
On the town website,
Right.
it's listed under...
Right, but I guess the concern would
Board.
be is that, knowing that there's going to be a meeting on a certain date, and then you're anticipating that you're going to be there for that date, but it was up a week, and you didn't go to the website, instead of going to the website every day and be seeing if there's a meeting change, is there, once the meeting comes, if there is a change, is there a way to notify department heads that there's a change?
With what media? Emails?
I'm asking.
I actually, for the Haddam Bulletin, I do post the changes, so if you join the Haddam Bulletin Facebook site, I put up there, as soon as I found out about this meeting being changed, I threw it up there. So as long as I know from the boards, I try to let the public know.
Sign on to you, can you
Just-
send an email blast back?
Just like the page on Facebook. I don't have, emails or anything, but I post it up there on the Facebook page. Yeah.
If we had the department head's email address, I'm sure that could be added to the list of people that we send our emails out to. As other committee members, we all get our emails. If your name was on the list, it would be just adding your name to the list, if you wanted to do it. That would be a very simple way to do it.
That could be accomplished, and certainly, I know we would certainly provide that to our department head, and we can get the word out to the other department heads.
Identify them first.
Identify.
There's 70 departments, and I ask at different meetings, who authorized this bill? And we don't know, so I share your thing.
Thank you.
We'll just keep going back and forth.
Yeah, Alan brought to my attention something that I didn't know when I was on the board with the waste process, the transfer station, that we are the only town that actually pays a tipping fee of private haulers in the town. Other towns don't do that. So the private haulers charge the individuals directly. So I don't know if you have if you know that fact and if you have a chance to think about it. I don't need an answer tonight, but I think that's something you should be looking at, because I think $100,000 is a lot of money. And if you want to subsidize the people that want to choose private hauling versus going to the transfer station, then we'll take it out of their taxes and give them a refund. But I don't understand why we're doing that particular thing.
Yeah, I think it's a longer philosophical discussion, but I think the other view of that is that all of the taxpayers are paying all of the tipping fees. So,
No matter where the garbage comes from,
no matter
comes
where
from your
the
house in Haddam.
So it's a very long philosophical discussion, but I think I could reverse your comment about thinking to subsidize to be exactly the opposite. And it is what it is. But I think to just say, geez, we should subsidize the people who go to the dump, but we shouldn't subsidize the taxpayer who has a private hauler taken out of town for him. I'm not sure. He pays taxes to both.
I had no problem with that, but then give it back to the people directly. Give the money back to them.
Could I answer that partially?
Sure.
I may have to take some responsibility in that, because when we did start the transfer station, that we been using for the last 25, 6, 7 years. I have to be the first one at the time. I pity you. But it was actually a fairness issue, but there was another more practical issue, is that we needed to cut traffic, car traffic in that area, period. It's as simple as that.
Part of your answer,
It's
I know. Yes, Al.
The difference, actually, to address, did you use the transfer station?
I recall.
I know that some of this, I know that Mr. Arson will use it, I know I use it. I'm going to have to pay $50 to go to the transfer station. But the fellow who gets his garbage picked up pays nothing. That's the distinction. That's the lack of fairness. We're all paying the tipping fees, but I'm actually...
Except we wouldn't, and I don't want to, we'll be here all night, except if we didn't have to have a brand new transfer station and we just had private hauling, none of us would have to pay the $50. So,
But if I agreed to go pick up 5 of my neighbor's garbage and bought 1 sticker, and the other 4 didn't pay anything, would you consider those people doing something wrong? But that's what's happening with private pickup. For the 1,000 people who are getting their garbage brought to the transfer station, the carter isn't contributing to the town revenues by paying the equivalent of that individual's sticker fee. I'm just raising this point, I mentioned this to the first selectman, in terms of parity, fairness.
I beg to differ, but it's a long discussion.
But it's $100,000.
It's $100,000 that we all are going to pay either way. It's a matter of who pays it, that's all. The $100,000 won't go away.
No.
So, $100,000 won't go away. It's a matter of...
If the town did not fund that $100,000, then you would have to pay $3 more.
Right.
We could have no stickers and let everyone go for nothing, which a lot of towns do, and then everybody pays the transfer station cost out of their, on a pro-rata basis, and there's no more need to collect revenue.
Or we could have no transfer station and everyone could have a private hauler and just pay it all their own. So just, the argument just keeps going in circles.
Hi.
Steve Bailey, I'm new to town. A couple questions. What's the bond rating for the town?
Well, that's a good question. We actually don't have one because we've never had that before. So that's something that we're working on.
So there's bond ratings have never had a concern that the town has no debt. Because you should have about 8 to 10% of your operating budget should be debt, because debt isn't always a bad thing.
You're right, that is always not a bad thing.
So it shows that you're investing back in the town. That's why bond ratings like towns that have debt, because it shows that they're not putting expenses off until it pays it. So that's why I was worried about.
Yeah. Okay, well, Joanne, sure, go ahead.
One last one.
All right.
No, I like being on this side. The projects that were not done, that you want the taxpayers to vote on, have those been looked at? Are they really still needed? I guess that's my concern. I mean, one of them's over 6 years and nothing was done. So does that?
Oh, you're talking about
the page 9.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, those are the projects that we have looked at. We worked with Georgia and the selectmen, and these are the projects that are still needed, as far as we know, yes.
Now, you've got soccer netting as an old one from 2008, and you've got it also on this year. Is that additional soccer netting? Is it?
I think the
More
netting that's
expensive.
to purchase, the $6,000 is to purchase the netting, and what it is this year is to actually do the work. Like throw it, yeah, I'll put it in.
I have a quick question, sorry. Do you pay the hauling or the tipping fees for all private haulers in town?
I want to say yes.
So if any private hauler went there, they can just dump for free?
I will, yeah, I don't know about that. I would. Paul, do you know? Is there anybody?
What was the question?
Do all the private haulers get their tipping fee taken care of by the town?
If they're pickup and a Haddam resident, the tipping fee is included it's paid for by the town when it's processed.
So all the private haulers can bring our refuge to the dump for free?
Well, some of the private haulers will go directly to CRRA. Some will go directly to Essex. Very few really are taken directly to the dump. So we have the dump of the material picked up by the dump and then delivered to the department.
Thanks.
So my argument about this is that okay, not to name anybody, but we have people in town we trust to do this, but we have now new haulers coming from outside taking business. Do they go to the CRA and say, "Oh, this garbage is from Haddam. I swear it's from Haddam." My friend just opened it, and we saw envelopes and how do we know? My point, give it to the people, don't give it to the whole people who don't know. That's all.
You know, it's a point well taken, and it's philosophical in nature, and
The whole issue of the operations of the transfer station, as was noted in the information we need to get, is that it's a work in progress. Okay, we don't know what the needs of...
Well, the people in the back can't hear you, so if you could stand up.
The whole issue of the transfer station and the operations is that it is a work in progress. We don't know what the real effect is going to be with this transfer station. It's going to be a vehicle that can be used efficiently. Many more people may want to use it. We're expecting to pick up at least 10%, possibly 20% of our users. In so doing, our goal would be to reduce the amount of bulk and waste. Our goal would be to address other areas that we can reduce our costs. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things as we go along. The most important thing to start with is to make sure that we have vigilance and we protect the residents who want to use the station themselves. We need to get all the loopholes and all of the issues where people are using their bulk waste in commercial traffic and so on. But it is a work in progress, and the goal is to reduce costs. I mean, the whole idea of having something efficient will enable us to reduce costs. And we're going to consider a lot of different things over the first 12 months. And we can use all the help we can get and all the input we can get, because it is our goal to be efficient. So I don't think honestly, I know there's some good questions, just be patient. And we will address all these things, and we certainly will reduce costs as time goes on.
All right, well, whoops, one more, okay.
I just have a question I don't understand. History has shown us that Haddam ambulance costs are in there. To me, as a townsperson, seeing the service out there, and we heard from Scott, it's a slap in their face, these people that have been providing a service to this town, to put them into a contingent fund that may be used somewhere else. To say, hey, maybe we'll have your money there when you need it. You just dangle on that. You know, I just want to see a little more explanation on the school of thought of taking that money out and putting it into this fund. To me, it doesn't make sense. To me, I look on the next page, I see increasing Haddam Park and Rec, Haddam Recreation Authority. What do the people of this town think of having their kids protected, let alone play ball in new fields, on a $30,000 parking lot that went in across the street from my house, that there's a gate across so people can't park in it? That frosts me. So let's think about protecting our people, putting the money where it needs to be, And not saying, here, we might have it for you. Put it in the line item, please. Thank you.
Real quick, side note to that, what was the ambulance's total income for last year?
$268.
And was that more than enough to cover the total operating budget?
No.
What's the total operating budget for one fiscal year?
I don't have that number with me, but I can share it with you.
You know, I just want to mention that the Board of Finance's meetings are public, open to the public, and they'll be posted in advance on the town's website under the Board of Finance's department. So if any of you would like to attend those meetings, you are free and welcome to attend them. And, you know, we're interested in hearing from everybody, so please stay advised for the summer when we're meeting and discussing this further. Yes.
The next meeting is May 23rd, the town.
Next meeting is in 2 minutes.
Next meeting,
And after that meeting is May 23rd, is that correct?
May 23rd is the selectmen's meeting
And that will be held.
for the budget meeting, which is where it gets voted on.
And do you know when that site's going to be?
Yes,
Right here.
In the bay, up there.
Well, in the community room. I don't think it'll be here, it'll be in the community room. 7 o'clock, I think. Call it 7 o'clock.
Then, Scott, with the town meetings, they're basically facilitated by the moderator, and the moderator is the one that carries the town meeting through the legislative functions. In this case, because the purpose of the town meeting is to vote on the budget, and hope that they will still answer questions. It's not just a doctrine numbers.
Yes.
Just to, I changed my mind while sitting here. I would like to support adding the $20,000 to the jail committee.
Thank you. Yes. We'll definitely take that into consideration. Okay, well, I would like to thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate you coming out on this rainy evening and adjusting your schedules to meet ours. Thank you for your input. We appreciate everything you have to say, and we'll definitely take it into consideration when we can